We did hear from Trudeau on some breaking news that we are also following for you, and it comes from China, where a court sentences a Canadian man to death. His name is Robert Schellenberg. He was already serving 15 years for drug smuggling, and now the court is calling that too lenient. There is already widespread speculation this move is simply the latest escalation in the diplomatic dispute, the tensions between Ottawa and Beijing. So at this swearing-in ceremony, and I am keeping a watch for you on other ministers coming to that microphone, but at the swearing-in ceremony today during the shuffle, here's what the Prime Minister had to say on the China story.
As a government, we actually strengthened the policy that requires the Canadian government to always intercede on behalf of Canadian facing the death penalty anywhere in the world. We will continue to do that as we have in this case. But I will say it is of extreme concern to us as a government, as it should be to all our international friends and allies, that China has chosen to begin to arbitrarily apply death penalty in cases facing, as in this case, facing a Canadian.
Now, we'll stick with the Schellenberg case. It is breaking news. Take you live to Beijing. CBC Asia correspondent Sasha Petrusik is on the story. What happened in court today, Sasha?
Well, Suhanna, a lot happened in court today. These new, tougher charges were introduced by Chinese prosecutors. There were legal arguments. There was a new witness that was called. He testified, and by the end of the day, there was an actual verdict. So we went from a 15-year jail sentence for Robert Schellenberg to the death penalty. The testimony that was heard today was a man who said that he helped Schellenberg pack some 200 kilograms of drugs into car tires, which were then going to be shipped outside the country to Australia. That was what he was originally charged with, but this was, the charges today were upped. It was a more serious version. It went from simply drug trafficking to organizing international drug trafficking, and that's what got him the death penalty.
This happened, as we know, very quickly. In terms of the timing, what do you make of it?
Well, it happened incredibly quickly. You know, I haven't covered any court system in the world that could manage to actually do all of this in a few hours. His original sentence took 4 years to settle. All of that legal argument and the witnesses, the testimony, all the evidence, that took 4 years. This took a matter of a few hours. It's very clear that in this country, when there's a political priority, everything else gets pushed out of the way. It's also very clear that the courts in China are very much under the control of the ruling Communist Party. So when there is a priority with the government here in Beijing, things get done, and things get done very quickly. So whether or not this was tied to the Huawei case in Canada, it was certainly tied to some political priority, as I say, here in Beijing.
We'll talk again. Thank you, Sasha. Asia correspondent Sasha Petrusik in Beijing. On those rising diplomatic tensions between Canada and China, it began, as Sasha mentioned, with the arrest and the subsequent release of that Chinese telecom exec Meng Wanzhou. Laura McQuillan is working on furthering this story. How do the Huawei pieces fit into this sentencing puzzle, if you will?
It is a key part of that context. You can't see the two as separated now just because of the timing, as Sasha mentioned there. And we heard Justin Trudeau call this sentence arbitrary. So the government's certainly looking at this as potentially something politically motivated coming out of China. Of course, Schellenberg's case has been ongoing 4 years, but we've seen that rapid movement in the past couple of months with his appeal, a retrial, and now a verdict and a sentence all in one day just there. And it actually only began gaining attention in the Chinese media last month in relation to Meng Wanzhou's arrest, Chinese media linking the two. Now, a lot of people will be asking, is there something political behind this sentence? Because China's government is keeping that pressure on Canada and the US over Meng Wanzhou's arrest, repeatedly calling for her to be released, for the charges that she's going to face in the US to be dropped, and for Canada to not extradite her to the United States. So that pressure continues coming out of China. We see that time and time again from its foreign ministry. Every time they are asked about these Canadians detained in China, they find a way to link it back to Meng Wanzhou about the conditions she faced when she was arrested in Canada. So this is one that Canada continues to watch closely, as we saw Justin Trudeau say. Schellenberg has been receiving that consular support for 4 years now, but exactly what the government might do here next, well, we'll have to wait and see. We have reached out to Global Affairs, Sue Hannah, and we are waiting to hear back about their take on this.
I want to ask you about those other two names that Canadians have become familiar with. There's Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, two Canadians who were detained by the Chinese after this whole Huawei story broke. What is the latest we're learning about Michael Kovrig, one of those men?
So we're hearing China biting back today at some earlier comments from Justin Trudeau, comments Trudeau made on Friday, where he said that China was not respecting diplomatic immunity in relation to Kovrig. Now, Kovrig is a former Canadian diplomat who was posted to China, but when he was arrested, he was not in the country on a diplomatic passport. He was on a regular passport and a business visa, working as an advisor to an international think tank. And now China has made that distinction in comments responding to Justin Trudeau. A spokeswoman for their foreign ministry told a media briefing, and we can show you her comments, "We suggest the relevant Canadian people to carefully study the Vienna Convention and international laws before speaking so as not to be ambiguous and become a laughingstock." And she continued saying, "No matter which perspective one takes to view the case, Michael Kovrig does not have diplomatic immunity." Now, of course, he's just one of those two Canadians who were detained last month in China on national security grounds. The other one, Michael Spavor. Both remain in custody at this point in time. Canada watching both their cases closely, and a lot of people linking those arrests to Meng Wanzhou's arrest in Vancouver. So for now, we'll have to wait and see what the government comes out with later today on the arrest or the verdict in Schellenberg's case, because this is going to be heating up once again, and that pressure from both sides we'll have to watch.
I know you're on it. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.